Hello again. We are all of us used to seeing black actors featuring in period dramas on the television. Things set in 1950s England, Victorian London, or the time of the Tudors, the Saxons, the Roman occupation, the Stone Age, or any other time really in the history of the British Isles. Why is this done only with black people though, and not, say, Indians or Chinese? There is no doubt at all that in Victorian England or Tudor London, stray people, almost all of them men, could be found from other parts of the world. There were Arabs and Indians, Chinese people and Africans, Russians and Jews. Mostly these were just tiny numbers of random individuals, although in the 19th century there were larger communities. I'm thinking now of places like Little Italy in London's Clerkenwell district, for instance, or the Chinatown in Limehouse. What is a little odd is that the only ethnic group ever shown as being around were people of sub-Saharan African ancestry. There were black people in England over the centuries, although they were few and far between. When a woman called Miranda Kaufman wrote a book called Black Tudors a few years ago, she did a huge amount of research and was able to identify just 5 genuine black Africans living in Tudor England. 5. And this is an entire book she wrote on the subject. One of them was, of course, John Blank, the trumpeter, whose image crops up every time that the claim is made that this country has always been multicultural. There were, of course, just as many Chinese people to be found in Britain over the centuries. We never seem to hear about them, which is odd. The claims that black people lived here during the time of the Romans, well, the evidence for that is sparse and unconvincing. Whenever DNA studies are made, the supposed evidence for the Africans simply vanishes, as happened with the so-called Beachy Head woman a few years ago, who turned out actually to be from Cyprus. I mean, there is just as much evidence that Chinese people lived in London during the Roman occupation as there is for black people. In 2016, it was reported that the skeletons of 2 Chinese people had been unearthed at a 4th century Roman cemetery in Southwark. I give a link to a news item about this in the description to this video. I do not say that the skeletons were Chinese, you understand. They were identified by the same dubious methods which have been used to claim that some other skeletons belong to black Africans. I am pointing out that as much evidence exists for Chinese people in Roman London as does for sub-Saharan Africans. When the BBC made the horrible histories programme about the Romans in Britain, though, they employed black actors to play the part of Romans at that time, rather than Chinese people. Why do you think that was? Why do you think that although everybody is now familiar with the picture of John Blank the Tudor trumpeter, nobody has ever seen the painting which is shown in the thumbnail to this video? It shows Shen Fuzong, a Chinese scholar who visited Oxford in 1687 and lived in England for some time. In the description to this video I give a link to a bit about this man. Why do viewers suppose that the image of this Chinese man who lived in England in the 17th century for as long as John Blank did in the 16th is not nearly as familiar to us? When the BBC made the latest part of the Wolf Hall series about Thomas Cromwell, the Tudor statesman, they featured quite a few black people supposedly living in Tudor England. Why do you suppose they chose black people and not Chinese people? What is it about black people which means that we must focus upon them rather than Indians or Chinese people? Who decides that this is the line which must be adopted? Would viewers be surprised to see Chinese people or Indians being placed in, say, that drama about Thomas Cromwell? No one was surprised to see black people featured. Would people have been surprised if there'd been half a dozen Chinese people featured in it? It would have been just as historically accurate. After all, there were no fewer Chinese and Indians about in our history, but we are happy to forget all about them and focus exclusively upon black people. Why?